December 28th, 2025, Tehran. If you were standing in the middle of the Grand Bazaar that morning, the first thing you would have noticed wasn't the noise, it was the silence. For over 1,000 years, this maze of covered passages has been the beating heart of Persian commerce. A place of shouting merchants, haggling customers, and the endless clatter of gold and spice trade. But on this day, the metal shutters came down, one by one, then hundreds at a time. The merchants didn't shout. They didn't riot. They simply locked their doors, walked into the streets, and stood in silence. To an outsider, this looks like a strike. But to anyone who knows Iranian history, this was a death warrant. You see, back in 1979, these same merchants, the Bazaris, were the financial backbone of the Islamic Revolution. They funded the movement, they paralyzed the Shah's economy, they helped put the mullahs in power, and now, 47 years later, they have turned against the very monster they created. What began that morning wasn't just a protest against a collapsing currency. It was the beginning of the end. Within 48 hours, millions would flood the streets of all 31 provinces. The internet would go dark, and President Donald Trump would tweet 3 words that sent a chill down the spine of the supreme leader. Locked and loaded. But here is the twist. The story you are about to hear isn't about a war. It's not about an American invasion. It's about something far more terrifying for a dictatorship. It is a story of hubris, humiliation, and the cold, hard arithmetic of regime survival. This is the anatomy of the 2026 Iranian Revolution. To understand why the bazaar closed in December, we have to rewind 6 months, to the moment the regime's soul was broken. For decades, the Islamic Republic built its entire identity on one thing: power. They projected an image of invincibility. They called it the axis of resistance. A multi-billion-dollar empire of proxy forces stretching from Hezbollah in Lebanon to Assad in Syria to the Houthis in Yemen. It was a masterpiece of asymmetric warfare designed to threaten the world while keeping the fighting far away from Iranian soil. But in late 2024, the dominoes started to fall. First, it was Hezbollah, decapitated. Their command structure wiped out in weeks. Then came the shocker, Syria. Bashar al-Assad, the man Iran spent billions of dollars and thousands of lives to prop up, fell in a lightning offensive. Just like that, the land bridge to the Mediterranean was severed. The billions of dollars invested in Syria? Vaporized. As one intelligence analyst put it, there is no axis without access. Iran was suddenly alone. But a regime can survive the loss of allies. What it cannot survive is the loss of fear. June 13th, 2025, a date that is now etched in history. Israel launched Operation Rising Lion. For years, Iranian generals bragged about their air defenses. They claimed their nuclear sites at Natanz and Fordow were buried under mountains of rock, impenetrable to anything but God. They were wrong. Over the course of 12 hours, more than 200 jets struck targets deep inside Iran. It wasn't just the damage, it was the precision. Radars were jammed. S-300 and S-400 systems, the best Russian technology money could buy, sat silent, blind to the incoming threat. Nuclear facilities were hit, Revolutionary Guard commanders were assassinated in their own safe houses, and the Iranian Air Force, they didn't even get off the ground. The regime tried to hit back. They had to. They launched nearly 900 ballistic missiles at Israel, the largest barrage in history. State TV showed footage of fiery explosions, claiming Zionist cities were burning. But the Iranian people have VPNs. They saw the truth, 99% interception rate. The damage to Israel was minimal. The damage to Iran's reputation was fatal. Then the United States stepped in to finish the job. American B-2 Spirits, Ghosts in the Sky, delivered bunker busters that turned the underground facilities at Fordow into tombs. President Trump announced a ceasefire shortly after, declaring Iran's nuclear ambitions set back by a decade. The morning after the strikes, Tehran was eerily quiet. Supreme Leader Khamenei appeared on TV claiming divine victory. But for the average Iranian looking at the craters, looking at the unharmed American jets flying away, the illusion was shattered. The regime wasn't a superpower. It was a paper tiger. They had traded the nation's wealth for weapons that didn't work and allies that couldn't save them. A wounded animal is dangerous. But a humiliated animal loses its authority. The fear was gone, and when the fear evaporates, all that is left is the hunger. While the generals were losing the war in the skies, the people were losing the war for survival on the ground. And this is what actually kills a regime. Not bombs, but bread. By December 2025, the Iranian Rial didn't just fall, it ceased to function as money. 1.45 million rials to the dollar. Let that sink in. In 1979, before the revolution, 70 rials bought you $1. Today, the currency has lost 99.9% of its value. The savings of 3 generations, gone. Statistics are dry. Let's look at the reality. A report from Tehran described a scene in a supermarket in the upscale district of Valyasa, not a slum, but a middle-class neighborhood. A man in a suit, probably a teacher or a retired civil servant, was seen weeping in the meat aisle. He wasn't crying because of the war. He was crying because he couldn't afford chicken for his family. Witnesses saw him tearing the wings off a raw chicken and trying to hide them in his coat before running out in shame. That is the face of the Islamic Republic in 2026. Prices for food rose 72% in a single year. Medicine disappeared, and then the government made the fatal mistake. Desperate for cash to rebuild the military, they cut the subsidies on fuel and wheat. They announced a tax hike on the Bazaris. They thought they could squeeze the population one last time. They were wrong. It brings us back to that morning in the Grand Bazaar. The shopkeepers of the Aladdin shopping centre, the electronics hub, were the first to crack. Their inventory is imported. They buy in dollars, they sell in rials. With the currency in freefall, every item they sold was a loss. Opening the shop meant going bankrupt. So they closed. And when the police came to force them open, they didn't back down. They started chanting, "Not death to America, not death to Israel." They chanted, "No Gaza, no Lebanon. My life only for Iran." This was the spark. The regime had weapons to fight Israel. They had prisons to hold dissidents, but they had absolutely no defense against an entire nation that had simply stopped working. January 2026. The protests are no longer about food. They are about survival. And the face of this revolution looks different. In 2022, after the death of Mahsa Amini, it was the women of Iran who led the charge. They were brave. They were iconic. But in 2026, a new force has joined them on the front lines. Generation Z men. These are young men with no jobs, no future, and absolutely nothing left to lose. They are not marching peacefully. They are fighting back. Videos verified by international agencies show running street battles in Isfahan, Mashhad, and Tabriz. They are using Molotov cocktails. They are using lasers to blind security cameras. They have learned from Hong Kong. They have learned from Ukraine. And for the first time, the security forces are afraid. But a revolution needs more than anger. It needs a symbol. And from the shadows of history, a ghost returns. Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah. For 47 years he lived in exile, waiting for a moment that many thought would never come. On January 6, 2026, he released a video message. He didn't call for violence, he called for unity. He asked Iranians to do one simple thing. At exactly 8 p.m, go to your rooftops and chant. And on January 8th, the night sky of Tehran erupted. Death to the dictator! Reza! Reza! It wasn't just a chant, it was a referendum. The monarchy, once reviled by the revolutionaries of 1979, was now being hailed as the only alternative to the chaos. The regime, panicked and cornered, did the only thing it knows how to do: violence. But violence has a limit. It works until it doesn't. The breaking point came in a hospital in Tehran. January 10th, security forces, the besieged militia, stormed an emergency room to arrest wounded protesters. Doctors tried to stop them. Tear gas was fired inside the ICU. A 16-year-old girl, already wounded, was dragged from her bed. The footage of that moment, leaked by a brave nurse, broke something in the national psyche. It wasn't just brutality. It was sacrilege. Even during the war with Iraq, hospitals were sanctuaries. Now, the regime had crossed the line from which there is no return. And this is where the math of regime survival falls apart. To shoot your own people, you need soldiers who are willing to pull the trigger. But these soldiers, they have families too. Their mothers are shopping in the same empty supermarkets. Their sisters are the ones being gassed in the hospitals. Reports began to surface of Revolutionary Guard units in the provinces refusing orders. In Shiraz, a commander was shot by his own men when he ordered them to fire on a crowd. This is the nightmare scenario for the supreme leader. When the gun is pointed at the people, the regime is safe. But when the gun wavers, the game is over. While Tehran burned, eyes turned to Washington. President Trump, fresh off a military operation in Venezuela, issued a final warning. The United States is watching. If you slaughter your people, we will not stand by. It wasn't a threat of invasion. It was a threat of precision. The message was clear. The US Air Force could decapitate the regime's leadership without ever setting foot on Iranian soil. For the mullahs, this was checkmate. Crack down too hard? Invite American tomahawks. Show weakness? The revolution consumes you. They are trapped in a dilemma of their own making. So, where does this leave us? As I speak, the internet in Iran is still dark. The death toll is unknown. The streets are stained with blood and ash. But one thing is certain. The Islamic Republic of Iran, as we knew it, is dead. It died in the skies over Natanz when its missiles failed. It died in the supermarkets where fathers wept over chicken wings. And it died in the hearts of the people when they realized their government was their greatest enemy. History tells us that revolutions are messy. They are chaotic and they are rarely quick. The regime still has guns. They still have money stashed away. But they have lost the future. The generation on the streets today will never accept their rule again. Whether it takes weeks, months, or another year, the clock is ticking. And for the first time in nearly half a century, the people of Iran are not looking back at the past with regret. They are looking forward to a sunrise that finally belongs to them. This is a developing story, and history is being written every single hour. We will be following the events in Iran closely. If you want to understand what the new Middle East might look like after the fall of the Ayatollahs, make sure you are subscribed. And click this video right here to see how the fall of Iran will reshape the global oil market. Thanks for watching.